most decorated free skier in history. I think that's an answer in and of itself.
One thing that surprised me about this Eileen Gu controversy was not China's reaction. That part was very predictable. The part that surprised me was the reaction in the West, especially from people who are generally very outspoken and critical of human rights violations, about authoritarianism. Many commentators who normally would talk about these issues suddenly became very, very sympathetic toward Eileen Gu. It's even more than just sympathy. I think a lot of them are cheering for Eileen Gu for being a capitalist. The disagreement around Eileen Gu isn't really about sports. I mean, it's obvious, right? Because there's more than just one medalist. It's about how differently people understand China. Welcome to my channel. My name is Lu. I was born and raised in authoritarian China, and today we're going to talk about Eileen Gu. If you don't remember who Eileen Gu is, Eileen Gu was born and raised in the United States, but in 2019 she made this controversial decision to represent China in international skiing competitions. At the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, she won 2 gold medals and 1 silver for China, and that is the start of her professional career. Just like that, overnight she became this internet sensation, and people call her the skiing princess. This obviously was a boost for Chinese nationalism, but the timing of that decision really mattered. The Beijing Olympics happened at a moment when China was facing intense international criticism over human rights issues in Xinjiang. Reports about the detention of Uyghur Muslims were dominating global headlines. And obviously, she was repeatedly asked about these issues and whether she, would comment on those issues during her performance at the Olympics. But she repeatedly told reporters on camera that she is apolitical, that it's sad that people are focusing on politics and not sports.
And they're like, so what do you think about US-China geopolitics? And I'm like, I just won the Olympics. Like, you are asking me to solve problems that world leaders cannot solve? Are you kidding me?
But that didn't really stop the criticism, because despite her, denial, the very move of an American-born athlete chose to represent China at that very moment, that decision is political. And I'm going to show you she actually was lying when she said she doesn't want to be political, and that she consciously made that decision knowing very well what was going on because she wanted the money and the fame.
大家都指着我说我是老外，但是我自己觉得自己是中国人吧。
I think it's interesting to witness how the discourse around Eileen Gu has changed, because again, this is not the first time that she represented China in the Olympics. This is the second time. If anything, I think she's somehow rallied more supporters, and those people are generally people that are younger and left-leaning in the United States. I remember 4 years ago, I saw one argument that kind of went viral on Twitter or X. Something like, for years, Americans told Chinese Americans to go back to where they came from. And now someone actually does it, and people have a problem. I remember that specific tweet got a lot of likes and retweets, and it really stayed with me to a point that it's been 4 or 5 years now. I still remember that person who made that post was a Chinese American, obviously. What really shocked me was she was actually very critical of China, but still I think a lot of people who feel like they share a very similar identity as Eileen Gu supported her.
A young Asian woman. I feel so much fulfillment from this that it's like, oh my gosh, if you're a reporter and you still want to try to spin this into a weird geopolitics story that it's not, it never has been, never will be, then you can go do that. Get your 1,000 views.
And for some reason that really just stayed with me, because I then realized we might agree on a lot of issues about China, but there's a split in Chinese Americans who were raised and who were born in the States, and someone like me who didn't have the luxury, who didn't have the opportunity to grow up in a real democracy, one of the strongest democracies in the world right now, how we value different things. For me, identity and a lot of like other societal issues, they have to go under human rights. They have to go under freedom. I think that's something that's really important for me. So when someone claims that she is doing this because she wants to inspire little girls in China, when she talks about, you know, how she is for gender equality, but then she is representing a country that is constantly violating human rights issues, that is a red flag for me. That is a no for me. I would never admire, respect, or support someone who does that. You know, if someone who's never really grew up under an authoritarian regime, obviously the issue of identity as a minority, I guess, in a democracy outweighs the importance of human rights violations. And I think China knows that. And it's one of the reasons that they picked a Chinese American to represent them, right? Look, the PRC could have easily invested in someone else. They could have invested in someone who was born and raised in China. But they groomed Eileen Gu. They picked Eileen Gu and they invested heavily in her because she is an American. Because they know, they have this deep understanding that this would give them support from not only people who are kind of apolitical and don't really know a lot about China, but also those who might be critical of the regime otherwise. I'll give it an example. In one interview with Time magazine, she was asked about accusations that China had abused its Uyghur Muslim population. And her response was essentially, and quite literally, that it's none of her business. She said, I haven't done the research. I don't think it's my business. I'm not going to make big claims on my social media. And she didn't stop there. She even went further. She said, I'm just more of a skeptic when it comes to data in general, which is shocking. Like, why? So it's not like I can read an article and be like, oh, well, this must be the truth. I need to have a ton of evidence. I need to maybe go to the place, maybe talk to 10 primary source people who are in a location and have experienced life there, and then I need to go see images. She's trying so hard to present herself as this responsible public figure. It's very sophisticated maneuver. But let's just break it down. Eileen Gu, she has an international relations degree at Stanford. It is shocking to hear that she hasn't done the research. Either she's lying or she just truly didn't know, which is unlikely because it's everywhere. And she was asked this question so many times, how can you not know at this point? And it's 2026. It's been going on for 4 years at least in the media. And I want to say that this is more than just her dodging, refusing to make a claim. She did more than that. She questioned the evidence. She questioned the reality. And she's, in a way, encouraging other people to question that because she's presenting herself as some responsible member of the society. And I think that is, out of everything, the most infuriating. You know, at the end of the day, it is your right to choose to represent a country if you're from a democracy. Fortunately or unfortunately, it is not illegal for Eileen Gu to betray the US and take money from the PRC. It's not illegal. But we have to be able to also see the damage that she's done to people, to Uyghur women that are suffering right now in those concentration camps, in those modern concentration camps. I think her tactics really resonated with people on the left and the younger generation, because the younger generation is all about self-care and it's all about what I can do. It's just the messaging is very clever and it's definitely targeting the mainstream left-leaning younger generation. So much so that I think they failed to see the hypocrisy in all of this.
I'm so proud of how I've done this Olympics. I joke, I'm not a betting woman, but if I were, I took a big gamble this time because I chose to do 3 events knowing that I hadn't trained halfpipe in 2 months, knowing that I would miss the halfpipe training. I'm an introspective young woman. Like, I spend a lot of time in my head, and it's not a bad place to be. Like, I would be obsessed with me today. Are you kidding? I would love me. Global beneficial impact is like my central theme. The fact is, a rising tide raises all boats.
She definitely didn't require the same level of evidence when she was criticizing the current administration in the US. Right? It's a selective criticism. She criticized the US government because it has the lowest risk for her. In fact, it probably would bring her more media spotlight, bring her more followers if she criticizes the US government. And like I always say, it is okay to criticize any government, in my opinion. You can criticize the US government, Canadian government. I think that's your basic rights. But I think we've arrived at a place where it is controversial to not criticize the US. People feel obligated to criticize the US, but it is not obligated, or it's even like understandable to not criticize China. Like, if you say nothing about the suffering of the Uyghur population right now in Xinjiang, nobody would think that you're not doing enough. Nobody would question that. In fact, a lot of them would question the facts. They would question whether it happened or not. But questioning the Chinese government has become such a low priority for this generation because of the information war that the Chinese government has waged. And it is so dangerous because then it creates this facade that the Chinese government is somehow more tolerable than the US, when in fact it's completely the opposite. I think at the end of the day, this is not a story about whether she's American or Chinese or what her real citizenship is. It really doesn't matter that much. And it only matters for Chinese netizens because they want that kind of nationalism, they want that pride. At the end of the day, this is not a story about her citizenship. It's about the decision that she makes and how we see that as a society. And I think we've gone off the rails. And please remember that maybe for you guys, who had the luxury to grow up in a democracy, this is all very in theory. This is not something that's tangible. But for people like me and for people who who are still living in China, this is their daily life, and this is something that they cannot escape, and I think we should all respect that. All right, that's all for today. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.